This shorty is a quick tutorial on simple organizational tricks to use in order to build an information model. A construction or building information model differs from a design model because it is piece-based. That means it's an assembly of all the objects that make up the model. Because many building models, including the one in this book, can run into thousands of pieces, it's important to control and organize the objects in the model. There are two minimal forms of control necessary to build an information model. One's an outliner. An outliner makes it possible to control the visibility, order, and organizational structure of the individual pieces in the model. The other is some kind of layer control. Layers give a broader phase level control of the model. For example, groups or clusters of objects can be joined into layers so that they can be shown or displayed in sequence. The layers for this model include each phase of the work breakdown structure. In addition, most modeling programs have the ability to create components or groups. This makes it possible to assign individual detail to an object. Groups and components are individual objects in an object-oriented modeling program. This separation of pieces is fundamental. The outliner and layer controls only support this piece-based level of modeling. In other words, these individual names are groups or components. As a rule, use components to make objects that are either going to be repeated more than one or two times, or they're going to be edited in more detail as the model evolves. Let's see how this works in a simple model. We'll build the masonry core around the elevator pit. The block wall begins by fabricating 4 basic objects. I'll show these with the outliner. There's a full block, 8 by 8 by 16 as a component, a half block, a door frame, and a piece of rebar which will scale to fit various uses. Note there's no detail in the profile of the block. We'll add that later. I can use the hide/unhide tool to bring in a loaded block because I have that load as a separate group and objects within the outliner tool. If I built this model as a simple piece-based model, I could just assemble the entire wall in one big organizational glob. What occurs though is that you get a long list of components that make up the work that's been done up to this point. So every block is a corresponding object in the outliner. Here's the frame of the door, by the way. The idea then is to take these blocks and organize them into lifts. And I'm going to coordinate the lifts with what I feel like these two masons could do in a day. We'll call this one a half day. I do this by putting all of these components in a single group. Now I can go in and select each one of these, but that take a long time. Or I just go back to the outliner and select them all at one time, including the half block, and group them. When I group them, I immediately name the group Lift 1. Let me also show you how to quickly extend these rebar. Now this rebar would be spliced by the masons as they came up the wall. I can quickly just extend the pieces that I have in there, those little embeds, by pulling them up. This is the same piece that was fabricated as an individual component. So I'm scaling these to pull them up a little bit at a time. These basic modeling techniques are covered in our book 3D Construction Modeling. You can also find them as SketchUp tutorials on their website, so I won't go into them in detail. When I have these organized in lifts like this, note that I can highlight a lift in order to actually see where that lift is. If I edit that lift, double click it or right click and edit, then I can actually see the objects. The rest of the model will be grayed out. This helps me work within that lift. I can even turn off the rest of the model. Again, these techniques are in our other book, 3D Construction Modeling. So now I have two lifts, and I'm going to continue the wall right on up to the ceiling. Each lift then is a day's work and now can be individually controlled. There's the second lift, lift 3, lift 4, then with scaffolding lift 5, and finally lift 6. So the outliner allows us to take quantities of components and organize them into groups. Then we can control the visibility of each one of those groups in order to show sequence modeling or to show particular details on any particular lift. I built all of these objects on the layer 0. So it's now possible to assign each one of these lifts to a different layer. That would allow me to control individual blocks or individual components within the layer itself. We start that by adding new layers. I take the entity information for each one of these, assign them to the new layer, now lift 1 and lift 2 are on two different layers and I can control them individually. The group is on a different layer, but the components within the group remain on layer 0. That way they can be moved from group to group or layer to layer. So we can turn off a lift by either hiding it here or turning it off at the layer control. So that's how the outliner and the layer tools work together to organize a construction model.